Hello there, boys and girls, and welcome to a special wildcard preview episode of Circling the Bases, proudly a part of NBC Sports Edge. I'm your host, Colin Henderson. Joining me today is the whole Circling the Bases gang, DJ Short, Drew Silva, and Mr. Christopher Crawford. Boys, the regular season is over, and the new look playoffs are finally here, and Chris, I am happy to say you can finally join the three of us here. We are now, all four of us will have teams represented in the postseason. Chris, congratulations to your Mariners for the first time in 21 years. Although it's a little bit of a bummer that the good people in Pacific Northwest still won't be able to get a home game if they can't get out of the first round, which is home just game, like I want to feel what that atmosphere is like after so long. But how are we feeling about the new format? We are now officially in the postseason. This is the new playoff format. 12 teams making the postseason this year rather than 10 of last year. 3 wild cards and 4 teams getting a bye. So DJ, start us off on this front. Like, obviously this is a new step in the post-lockout CBA playoffs.
Yeah. And I will say off the top here, if you guys call it fall frenzy, you're fired.
I'm good with that.
I've never heard that.
I haven't heard that, but I wasn't planning on using it.
They're trying to push that. They're trying to push that.
Oh boy.
I'm not really a fan, but I think we'll say this. It's sort of like artificial excitement. You know what I mean? I mean, we know what the motivation for this kind of stuff is, but it does get more teams in the mix. It's certainly a lot better than just a one-game wild card situation like we've dealt with in recent years. Sure. I do think it's interesting that the division winner with the worst record is thrown into this wild card mix because they still did win a division. That's somewhat flawed. I don't know how you feel about that, Drew.
I'm okay with it, and I think we talked about it a few weeks. You know, because there are down divisions. It's going to happen every year. Yeah. In recent history, it's been the Central teams, and it was the same this year. I'm okay with it. The Cardinals should have to play in the wild card round. They're clearly not as good as probably 3 teams in the National League at least, and so you got to fight your way in, and it's the element of being able to host it at your stadium over a weekend too. I hope they keep it on a weekend because that's
I think
that's fun and it's big money like for the surrounding restaurants and bars and obviously the stadium itself.
One thing I will say though is that sort of expanding this made the end of the regular season not as exciting.
Yeah.
Will it always be that way, though?
That's what I was going to ask.
It may or may not. Yeah. But the other thing is that there would have been a game 163 between the Braves and the Mets if it was under the old format. We would have had a definitive winner of the East instead of 2 teams with 101 wins. So who could have predicted that would have happened? But
I would say this, though. Maybe Atlanta plays that series against the Marlins a little bit differently if there wasn't a 163. You know, this is kind of to me like, you know, right around December 5th, you get real anti-Christmas. You know what I mean? Like, it's like, oh my gosh, we're doing the holiday season over again. And now that it's here, I'm really excited about it. And I'll say one of the reasons I'm so excited about it is there are some legitimate aces pitching in this postseason series. Like, we have some legitimate top of the rotation arms that we're going to get to watch. And that's fun to me. That is ultimately my favorite thing about the postseason is seeing that 1v1, the best starter going up against that next best starter and seeing what happens, seeing who has that best stuff. So, yeah, it was kind of an really anticlimactic. Wednesday stunk. I'm just going to be honest with you. That was not a fun day of baseball.
No, it was like, let's press fast forward here.
Exactly, yeah. But Friday, I think, is going to be really fun. Oh, yeah. And, you know, you got to give some credit to baseball for creating at least that situation.
Yeah, and Jose Quintana going, aces all around.
Aces all around,
dude. Sorry, don't start this, DJ. But he had a 0.81 ERA over his last 6 starts. Sorry,
I know.
He's going. Yeah. But to bring up your point, Drew, I was trying to think back now that this is going to be basically baseball's version of a wild card weekend. Like, ideally, if these go 3 days in a row, all in the same spot, we could be talking about 4, series deciding games on Sunday, which would be thrilling baseball to watch if you are just a neutral baseball fan, or especially anybody who might be one of the 4 teams with a bye looking to see who's back. But Obviously, the end of the regular season was pushed back because of the lockout. I'm curious if maybe they learn from this in the future, because I think ideally this was probably going to be more of a midweek 3-game series rather than a weekend one. And I think the weekend is just going to make this play so much better in this best of 3 scenario.
For sure. Yeah, my only fear would be, you're going up against the NFL on a Sunday. I don't think that would have been their goal.
Fair point.
Honestly. Yeah.
They should just make them like, I don't know. I have takes on the NFL's broadcasting setup, because I love to watch Red Zone, but after the first noon 1 p.m. block of games, or Chris, I guess that's like 10 a.m. for you.
Yeah.
The 3 or 4 o'clock block is always terrible.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
or
maybe
at the very
baseball
least
can
it's
just
thin.
It's
Yeah.
well, thin. Yeah, it's not terrible, but it's thin.
And because it's not fun to watch that Red Zone either, because there's always a great game that gets protected by one of the other networks too, and you want to watch that over watching those other games that are just not as interesting. So the fact that, and I don't blame those networks for protecting those games, but because they do, that's the network that you want to turn on rather than turning on Red Zone, even if there are 4 or 5 games in that afternoon slate.
I'm usually just waiting all day for Sunday night.
Oh, yeah, me too.
Boy.
But that's just me.
You'd look just as good in a sequin dress.
Even in like my, I don't know, college years, high school years, I always hated Sunday night. I mean, I know this is our big flagship broadcast as NBC.
Now, is that an overall point about Sunday night, or is that a Sunday night football reference?
You have the Sunday scaries? Is that what you're saying?
Is that it?
Yeah,
Okay.
That's always been a thing.
Okay.
Sunday night football was just basically one big 3.5-hour reminder that work was coming up really soon the next day.
Exactly, Colin.
I get that. I can understand quite a bit.
Good save.
Or
Good
in
save.
college, like you said, that paper that I definitely didn't write just
Sure.
yet until after the final whistle.
Yes.
So we're about to get into obviously all 4 of the wild card matchups that are going to go down this weekend. And we'll talk a little bit about what not only the betting odds that we have associated with those series, but also obviously what the 4 teams on bye will be looking forward to in those games or in those series. But before we get to all of that, just a quick reminder, if you don't have the NBC Sports Predictor app, go download it now. The contests are free and easy to play, and you have a shot to win thousands this weekend by predicting what will happen in college football, Major League Baseball, on the NASCAR circuit, and in the Premier League. There's also $100,000 up for grabs by guessing the outcome between the Bengals and Ravens in our Sunday Night 7 contest. A great matchup on Sunday night, despite the Sunday scaries, but $100,000 up for grabs. So make sure you download the NBC Sports Predictor app today. So let's start with the American League wildcard series here. And the first 2 up, we have the Rays at the Guardians, the AL Central winners, versus the number 6 seed. Versus on the other side, we have the Mariners, like we said, breaking their 21-year postseason drought. They're going up above the border to the Blue Jays, who will be the 4 seed there. I'm still trying to remember the difference between the division winner and the number 1 wild card here. But yes, so let's start with the Rays at Guardians. Rays coming into the postseason, or I should say ending the regular season with an 86-76 record. The Guardians, meanwhile, like I said, AL Central champs with a 92-70 record after being woefully underappreciated preseason, end up winning the American League Central. Projected matchups in the series so far, Shane Bieber and Shane McClanahan. It's a Shane off. They're going down in game 1. Probables for game 2, Tristan McKenzie versus Tyler Glasnow. And game 3, Cal Quantrill, if need, or I should say game 3 if needed, Cal Quantrill versus TBD, probably some version of Rasmussen and Jeffrey Springs. Chris, why don't you start us off with this? Obviously, the Guardians have been one of the hottest teams in baseball over the last month, 3rd best record in baseball since September 1st. The Rays have been here before. This is a team that has made the postseason quite a few times over the last few years. And despite not having the star power that many of the other teams that we're going to mention have, continue to just win however they need to. By hook or by crook, they will win games. And fortunately for them, getting at least a little bit healthier now. Wander Franco back, Tyler Glasnow back. This team is getting a little bit of some reinforcements here. So, Chris, Tell me a little bit about what you're seeing from this matchup and what is some of the bigger X factors that you're looking at here.
Sure. Yeah. So some of this has to do with the fact that the Seattle Mariners are playing in a postseason series for the first time in 21 years, as we'll talk about many times on this show. This seems like the most uninteresting of the 4 series, if I'm being completely honest with you. Part of it because, Cleveland, has played great towards the bottom of the stretch. Tampa Bay did not. And I do wonder a little bit if Tampa Bay was unmotivated for that 5th seed, because as Colin and I have talked about, and I'm sure you guys have talked about before, there is a massive benefit to being the 6th seed over the 5 seed in the postseason this year, because especially in the American League, where you get Cleveland instead of Toronto in Toronto, and then you'll get to play the Yankees, who, let's be honest, have not looked anywhere near as good as the Houston Astros.
Yep.
I'd much rather have that path than the path of having to go play in Toronto and then have to go play the Houston Astros in a 5-game series with that starting pitching. I think it's really going to come down to the starting pitching. If Tristan McKenzie can pitch the way that he's pitched for most of the year and can avoid the one blow-up inning, which has been an issue for him. Like, he's a lot of 6-inning starts where he's given up, 2 or 3 runs, and they all seem to come in that one inning for them. If he is on, I think Cleveland can win this series fairly easily. I do have to give Tampa Bay a benefit. We've talked about this too, Colin, on our show. Postseason experience. There's a lot of postseason experience in this Tampa Bay team and a lot of talent on this Tampa Bay team as well. I think it's going to be an interesting series in terms of who wins it, and yet it's, being honest with you, the series that I probably won't pay as close of attention to.
They also have some bad start times. Game 1 is at 12:07 Eastern. Game 2 is at, I think, the same time for game 2.
So baseball clearly sees the lack of star power on both of these sides, at least in comparison to the other 3 wildcard matchups.
Right.
I think
it's going to be on the Ocho. It's going to be on the Ocho.
Exactly. They're okay with the West Coast people waking up at 9 and maybe missing the first inning here.
And I don't know. The Rays, to me, I look at this roster and I'm like, how did they even get where they are?
Yeah, fair.
There's like some, there's projectable upside. Rosarena ended the season in a big slump. Glasnow, what did he get up to? 40, or did he get to 64 pitches or 46 in his last start? Either way, he's not at full strength.
No.
Coming off Tommy John. Shane McClanahan had the injury toward the end of the year. He's not Shane McClanahan necessarily right now. I guess he could just show up.
Right.
These are the 2 weakest overall rosters of the 12-team field, right? And the Rays lost 12 of their last 16 in the regular season. They had already kind of secured their spot, so maybe they didn't care. But I mean, it's amazing the way they get the job done. But I don't really see this as a big challenger of a team. It's the baseball playoffs, and anything can happen. And the Guardians are like a weird team too. They're almost like the Royals, the 2015 Royals, a very contact heavy team. Really good bullpen arms.
Yep.
So maybe they could get it done in that way. Like, what are the odds for the Guardians to win the World Series? I had that pulled up. They've got to be at the bottom, right? Yeah, they're plus 3,000.
Wow.
If you wanted to throw $10 on that, why not? But I don't really see it for either of these teams making a deep run. I picked the Guardians to win this series 2-1, to win it on Sunday in the 3rd game. But
I have the Guardians. I have the Guardians just taking 2 and moving on. Wow. Now we should say the Guardians are the favorites in this series at minus 125. The Rays are the dogs at 105. The Rays for the first game, the Guardians are the favorites at minus 125. The Rays are plus 102. I could see maybe playing that Rays in the first game, but it depends on what kind of McClanahan shows up, because
100%.
like you were saying, when he came back, he wasn't quite himself.
Yeah.
5.21 ERA, 8 walks, 4 homers allowed over 4 starts, coming back from that shoulder impingement. And how much do they get from Tyler Glasnow? I just think there's a lot more questions on the Rays side of things. I think the Guardians have some. They're not boppers by any means, but they have one of the game's best players, Jose Ramirez.
Yes.
Andres Jimenez should get down ballot MVP votes. He's very solid defensively, made some big strides offensively this year. Steven Kwan's been great. Ahmed Rosario. Oscar Gonzalez has really been unheralded down the stretch here. Josh Naylor's had his moments too. I like the Guardians lineup better than the Rays lineup.
I do too.
Yeah.
They could pitch their bullpen's lights out. I think the Guardians get through this pretty quickly.
One thing you will say about the Rays is that even though we're talking about a lack of confidence in their starting pitching, one of the things that the Rays have shown all year, and they've shown throughout the last few years, is the ability to mix and match from the bullpen, especially when they get into postseason series. A very quick hook from Kevin Cash usually, but it does mean that they have found success in the past from that. If they are going to beat the Guardians, and if they are going to make any type of conceivably lengthy run in the postseason, that bullpen is going to have to be relied upon.
A lot of those relievers are injured too. Like,
and that's
Nick
the other
Anderson,
part.
Jalen Beeks, Fireisen, Colin Poche went on the injured list right at the end of the year. Andrew Kittredge has been out. Ryan Thompson has been out. I don't understand this team. That's what makes them kind of interesting. But
it's
having to play so many games against the American League East in the process too, and still with that roster and how banged up it's been, still 86 and 76 on the year.
This is the weakest Rays roster that's been in the postseason.
I agree.
In the past few years.
I think it's the weakest third wild card that I've actually ever seen in the American League.
Oh, okay.
Well, Chris, why don't you start us off then? Give us I should say, before I ask you for your picks, we are going to obviously make our predictions here as well. We are also going to be having essentially a fantasy team that each of us have now picked using one player from each team that has made the postseason. We'll get into that a little bit more in terms of, I believe the scoring and some of that will be on the website throughout the postseason, but we essentially have one catcher, first base, second base, third base, short, one outfielder, a utility player, 4 starting pitchers, and a reliever. Like I said, one player from each team will be on each of our teams. So Chris, make your prediction here for the series and give us who you're picking from both teams.
I'm going to go for the Guardians to win the series in 3. I was tempted to go 2 like somebody else did, but I just think at the end of the day, it'll be a 3-game series, and I'll be kind of bored watching it. I apologize. I'm just so excited about the Seattle Mariners. For the guys that I'm picking, I am taking Shane Bieber for one of my starting pitchers. I think that is an excellent matchup. I've seen enough from him. I was tempted to actually go with Tristan McKenzie, but I just feel a little more confident in Shane Bieber giving me like a 7-inning, 2-run start and then doing fairly well against that New York lineup as well. And then my relief pitcher is going to be Pete Fairbanks. And, I had to be sure about like whether or not he was even healthy because of what Drew was talking about. It seems like that they've dealt with a lot of injuries. He was really good this year. 24 games, a 1.13 ERA, was saving games down the stretch. Look, if I can catch lightning in a bottle and he can save some games for me, great. If not, if Tampa Bay is eliminated, like I think, oh, well, I lost a reliever.
Drew?
I'll go next. Yeah. I got Guardians to win it in 3 games. And my pick for the Guardians is Jose Ramirez, one of the best hitters on the planet. If the Guardians do stage that deep run and do win the World Series at the longest shot odds plus 3,000, it's going to be because Jose Ramirez went nuts.
There you go.
And then my pick for the Rays is Wander Franco. I should have gone with another shortstop. Probably there's a lot of good shortstops in the postseason field, but I didn't want to really like hitch my wagon to really anyone else on the Rays team except Wander Franco.
Makes sense.
That's fair.
DJ?
Yeah. I'm going Guardians in 2. Like I said, I think they dispose of the Rays pretty quickly. So from the Guardians, my pick is Emmanuel Clase, lights out closer. And if the Guardians move on, he could really make some noise and get some saves here. From the Rays, I'm taking Randy Arozarena. Maybe, he turns back the clock and, has some more postseason heroics. I think he's Wander Franco is capable of being great, but Arozarena can give you the power and the speed. He could go on a nice little run here. So Arozarena is basically filling my utility spot.
There you go.
I've got the Guardians in 3 as well, so a full sweep from Cleveland here. For my players, I'm the exact same as DJ here. I have Randy Arozarena for the Rays. It was really between him, like we've all basically said, between him and Franco for who we kind of wanted to pick from this team. And then Emmanuel Clase, like you said, DJ, I mean, an elite arm. He's going to have opportunities conceivably if they win this series and then have an opportunity to move on. He'll have opportunities one way or the other to get into the game, I'll take him as well. And like you said, Chris, worst comes to worst, I lose a reliever in this conversation. I can live with it.
Yeah.
Let's pop over to the other American League wildcard matchup as the Mariners head to Toronto to take on the Blue Jays. Mariners 90-72 on the year. Blue Jays 2 games better at 92-70. Projected matchups. Game 1 is going to be Alek Manoah versus Luis Castillo. Game 2 probables are Kevin Gausman versus Robbie Ray. And game 3 is still TBD versus Logan Gilbert is how the Mariners are planning to attack that so far. Winner will go on to face the number 1 seed Astros in the ALDS in a best of 5. Betting odds entering the series. Seattle is the underdog at plus 140, whereas Toronto is the favorite at minus 170. DJ, obviously, we are talking about we do not have to worry about vaccine requirements anymore for this conversation, which is a very big deal when we know at least one major starter for the Mariners is unvaccinated. And that would have been a very interesting wrinkle when we started to have this conversation. Now that is officially off the board, we can say we are going to have, full roster versus full roster here. What are you looking at? What are you looking forward to most in this series?
I think the Mariners pitching versus the Blue Jays offense. I mean, that's the story of this series, because I do think the Mariners have the edge from the pitching perspective. So you look at the top 3 they can roll out there, like you were saying, Castillo, Ray, Gilbert, but also that bullpen in Seattle. And I think this is I think someone who could be a breakout kind of burst on the national stage during this postseason is Andres Munoz, who's just fantastic.
Yep.
And I mean, the lights shine bright on some of these late inning, high leverage relievers in the postseason. He could be a real X factor in this series. The Blue Jays obviously are the better offensive team, but if the Mariners can neutralize that a little bit and get just enough offense, I think they could pull off an upset here, personally.
Chris?
I'm going to take a break, guys. I'm going to take a break.
I think DJ hit the nail on the head. It's that Seattle pitching staff against that loaded Toronto lineup. And again, I have some, like Kevin Gausman coming off that injury on Sunday, apparently everything good to go, but they really need him to pitch well, because after Gausman and Manoah, I think there's some real question marks. Jose Barrios, I just cannot count on whatsoever based on what he did and didn't do in 2022. The Blue Jays bullpen, I think, is kind of underrated, but not exactly full of, like Jordan Romano, a very nice stopper at the end. Not exactly flamethrowers that are going to miss a ton of bats between those guys. Like it'll be interesting to see. Seattle is one of the more patient teams, so I think that they can get into that bullpen. So that'll be interesting to see. Ultimately, I think one of the biggest things here is that this series is being played in Toronto instead of Seattle, because I think Toronto has a huge home field advantage. It's going to be really fun, though. I'm so excited. I have not watched a postseason baseball game since I was 18 years old on October 22nd of 2001. I have not been able to do that, and it should be fun.
You just don't watch baseball in October?
No. Okay. I rooted for a team, and I've rooted for financially some baseball teams. But you know what I meant, Drew.
I know. I'm just messing with you.
Oh, thank you.
I've watched.
Now's not the time.
All right, you've seen quite a few postseason games.
I was looking up how many postseason games.
Now I'm gonna go tally this. Actually,
your pizza sucks. Go ahead.
Yadier Molina's played 102 postseason games since 2004.
Shut up.
Okay, well there you go.
Carry the one. I don't know, something like.
So when he's not in the Hall of Fame, he can talk about how many postseason games that he's played.
Oh boy.
He's managing his,
I was going to say this show's about to take a hard right turn. Bring it back, Drew. Bring it back for us.
Yes.
I think he's actually a borderline Hall of Famer, but I know he's going to get in, so it doesn't really matter.
Me too.
This series is fascinating. I mean, Mets Padres is an awesome matchup too.
Yeah,
but this one is crazy. Like the Blue Jays, do you think they have the best lineup? I know the Dodgers are nuts.
Most talented lineup, yes. I think
Braves are super deep, but the Blue Jays, when they get going, and I feel like none of them all got hot at the same time this year. Bo Bichette ended the year on a crazy stretch. He had like 55 hits in his last 30 games or something. Vladimir Guerrero Jr. had, ups and downs. George Springer battled a lot of injuries, but when he's healthy and playing in the postseason, he hits leadoff bombs. It just happens.
Mm-hmm.
Teoscar Hernandez, Lourdes Gurriel is supposed to be back for the series. He can be an X factor. Santiago Espinal is supposed to be back for the series. Like those are guys that add depth. I agree that the pitching is a little bit, it's a little bit lackluster after Alek Manoah though, but I don't want to discount Alek Manoah. He finished on an incredible run. And when he cares, he's so fun to watch. Like he's a bulldog on the mound. He's a big dude. I think he's going to dominate in game 1, and it'll be up to Luis Castillo to kind of limit the damage against the Blue Jays lineup. And then maybe the Mariners can come back against, the Blue Jays bullpen toward the end of the game. I think it's a fascinating series. I like the Blue Jays lineup, and they have 2 really good pitchers. And I think in a best of 3, that's what, with home field advantage, I feel pretty confident the Blue Jays are going to get this done, but I'm intrigued to see it. And I'm rooting for the Mariners, Chris, for you.
Thank you, sir.
If that matters at all.
It does, but it doesn't at the same time.
Yeah, right.
All right, let's get our picks.
Yeah, let's get our picks in here for sure. I'll start off on this one here. I think Blue Jays, it being at home, like we've kind of said, it being up in the Rogers Center versus it being out in Seattle, which I think would be such a completely 180 flip in terms of home field advantage. For just the enthusiasm that'll be in the park. The Toronto offense, again, Bo Bichette getting hot right now at this time. It feels like he is an engine that gets this thing going. There's a lot more postseason experience. George Springer being on that Toronto team, there's a lot more postseason experience than obviously a lot of the Mariners who are being there for the first time. They're going to be asking a lot from guys like Julio Rodriguez and Ty France and Cal Raleigh. They're going to be asking a lot from those guys in their first postseason go-around. I think Toronto ends up taking it in 3. I think there's at least one game between Castillo or Robbie Ray that they'll just have one of those vintage games. But I think Sunday we're going to get down to it, and I think Toronto pulls out at -170. For my players, I have Bo Bichette as my shortstop just for how hot he was going into the postseason. I could not pick him from the Blue Jays as my representative from Toronto. And then where am I at? Luis Castillo for the Mariners here. Again, a guy who's been pitching just so well all year. In the trade deadline review that will eventually occur, the Mariners' decision to go get Luis Castillo rather than settle for Frankie Montas as the Yankees did is going to be a very fascinating microcosm of what this postseason might be. But give me Luis Castillo for the Mariners there, but Toronto wins it in 3.
I got Toronto in 2, and my players are Alek Manoah, who I think is going to, again, dominate in game 1. And then Julio Rodriguez for the Mariners. If the Mariners pull this off, he's going to have some huge moments. He's already one of the best players on the planet at age 21. I love Julio Rodriguez. So go do your thing, young man.
DJ?
I'm going Mariners in 3. Ooh. There you go, Chris. So I think as long as the Mariners can split the first 2 games, I think they can take game 3.
Massive advantage.
That's kind of what I'm thinking, and I think it will happen. My players. So from the Mariners, I have Luis Castillo. I think 3 out of the 4 of us took Luis Castillo here. Yeah, looking for a big game from him. And from the Blue Jays, I'm taking Bo Bichette. Just the way he swung the bat down the stretch. A lot of good shortstops. So this was a challenging exercise to take one player from each team.
Yes.
But with the way Bichette has turned it on down the stretch here, I'm taking Bichette.
Yeah, I'm going Mariners in 3. And I think that DJ, again, hit the nail on the head that the Mariners, I think, have a massive advantage if it can get to that Sunday game in Logan Gilbert versus Jose Barrios. I'm taking Luis Castillo. I love him against a right-handed lineup. I believe right-handers had an OPS below 590, right around there against Castillo this year. Just filthy stuff. And if they're going to advance, they're going to need him. And then for my Blue Jays, if the Blue Jays do advance, for my first baseman, I am going with my sweet Vladdy Jr. I just think that if they are going to advance, Bichette's big, but they really need Vladdy Jr. to be that guy that he was last year. And he's way too talented for me to believe that he'll be anything but great.
I feel like everyone should be rooting for the Mariners. In general, to win the World Series, they should be America's team, because
Yes.
I would love to see the Mariners win the World Series, go to the White House, and have Joe Biden say "Big Dumper."
It would be so
Where's
great.
Big
I was wondering where you were going to go
Dumper?
with that.
Where's
I was
Big
wondering where
Dumper?
you were going to go with that,
no.
but now you landed
Did
it
you-
well.
Did you guys hear Service yell "Big Dumper"?
I did.
Drunk as a skunk as possible. That is the
wonderful.
greatest moment that I've been in a stadium for.
It was
Thank you
pretty
again.
awesome.
Yeah,
That was pretty awesome.
Yeah.
All right.
Let's talk about it. Well, before we move over to the National League, let's just kind of briefly just give an idea. So, I mean, obviously, Yankees are waiting to face the winners of the Rays and Guardians. Astros are waiting for the winners of the Mariners and Blue Jays. Just let's look at this. Obviously, we've spoken about the 4 teams playing. Let's look at this from the Astros and the Yankees perspective. Is there anyone that those teams are rooting for an opponent in the next round? Is there anybody that they're kind of picking and saying, if we had the choice, we want that? Is anybody coming out of the wild card more important for those teams with a first round bye?
I think the Astros would want to see the Mariners first.
Oh, interesting.
I agree with that.
I think actually Houston might like to see Toronto. And the reason why I think they might want to see them is get that series over with in a 5-game instead of a 7-game series.
Okay.
And deal with the back end of that Toronto rotation in a 5-game series instead of dealing with, because you probably are only going to get Manoah and Gossman for 1 game at most, and you might not get even both. That would be something that I would be looking at, just because the Seattle Mariners in a 7-game series are going to be dangerous if they can have those guys actually starting. Luis Castillo, Robbie Ray, George Kirby, Logan Gilbert starting at full strength and getting multiple games. I think that's going to be an interesting one.
That's a good point.
I don't think the Astros want the Blue Jays. I think that's the only really scary team here to me. But I don't know.
I agree with you there. I mean, you just have to assume that the Astros, I mean, their pitching has been their hallmark this entire year. And now we have that kind of the pitching strength of the Astros versus the hitting strength of the Blue Jays. I'm sure they'd much rather try and match up their pitching against the Mariners and say, okay, we can outslug the Mariners in a best of 5.
Yeah. And with fewer travel days too, I want to say, like, the Astros pitching depth is going to shine.
Yeah, it should be at least. I am curious with these buys. Obviously, this is the first year that we've had buys in baseball. What wrinkle does that bring into this conversation? Obviously, fortunately, there's no travel in between the wild card series. It's going to be 3 games. It's going to be basically everyone missing out on a weekend series. They'll play on Wednesday, conceivably on Tuesday if they sat, and then we'll probably pick up Monday or Tuesday of next week. It'll be a little mini break for them, but obviously baseball players being creatures of habit, this is a very interesting conversation. Just what does a bye mean now that we are dealing with it for the first time?
I think the narratives will be written after the series is played. If whoever wins will say we were well rested. But whoever lost will say
we got too much rest.
Or we're out of rhythm, and you know what I mean. So that's the way it'll go every time.
Should we give our picks for the Yankees and the Astros as well for our fantasy players? So I'll just go real quick.
The Yankees and right.
Yeah. So for me, I have that really tall guy that hit a bunch of home runs this year as my utility player, Aaron Judge. Pretty easy to put him on.
We all have Judge?
Yes. I was going to say we could skip a step.
Yeah.
We all got
and then a bunch of us, I believe, also have Jose Altuve.
I think we all picked Altuve.
Yeah. I mean, there's second base is such
second
a
baseman.
bad position, and Jose Altuve is such a good second baseman.
I almost picked Jeff McNeil. And got a little cute, but I did.
There you go.
I did stick with Altuve.
Appreciate it. No, that makes a lot of sense.
Altuve and Judge, the 2 twins. We both picked them across the board.
Yes.
Let's pop over to the National League now, and let's start with the Phillies and Cardinals. Let's start with Drew Bert's Cardinals over there. Phillies 87-75, making the postseason for the first time in 11 years. So it's not just Seattle getting a chance to celebrate a playoff drought ending. Welcome to the good people of Philadelphia. They get to finally waste it since 11 years. So am I doing bad math in my head? 2011.
No,
so we're coming up against the Cardinals, who have been there quite a bit over the last 11 years. They win the National League Central 93-69 record. Projected matchups, game 1, like we said, Jose Quintana versus Zach Wheeler. Game 2, Miles Michaelis versus Aaron Nola. And game 3 will either be some combination of Montgomery, Wainwright, and Flaherty for the Cards. And the Phillies so far have said they will at least start with Ranger Suarez. Winner from this series will go on to face the Braves in the next round. Betting odds, Phillies are the underdog at plus 115. St. Louis, the favorite at minus 140. All 3 games will be played in St. Louis. Chris, why don't you start us off on this one here? What are you looking forward to most in this series?
I think this is a really interesting one. And I think it's partially because I take a look at the St. Louis Cardinals and I look at a good baseball team, but I look at a team that's built for the regular season more than the postseason. Just my personal opinion. And I look at the Phillies and I look at some of the star power that they have and some of the guys who have had success in the postseason, like Kyle Schwarber, and I look at Zach Wheeler and I look at Aaron Nola and the fact that they don't have Joe Girardi as their manager anymore. And I look at a team that is better built for the postseason than the regular season. If this series wasn't in St. Louis, I think my pick would be a lot easier, to be completely honest with you. And part of that is it's not an insult to the Cardinals. It's just Zach Wheeler and Aaron Nola in a 3-game series against Jose Quintana, like you said, has been lights out down the stretch. And Jordan Montgomery pitched extremely well after that trade for the most part as well. I just look at the Phillies and think that team is better built to win a 3-game series right now than the St. Louis Cardinals.
I mean, the criticism of the Phillies, and we've been doing it for a while now, is that they have no depth. And they are a top-heavy front-end talent team, but their front-end talent is awesome.
Yeah.
And in a best-of-3 series, you can kind of bull rush. Like, it doesn't really matter if you don't have a number 4 starter or your lineup isn't that deep. If Schwarber and Harper and JT Realmuto all do something special on a given Friday, Saturday.
Right.
So yeah, I'm really I agree. I think the Cardinals are a good baseball team because they play good defense and their pitchers pitch to contact for that defense and they play in a big ballpark. And Goldschmidt and Arenado are just super solid and they'll come through with big hits here and there. And Albert Pujols, what a story that second half was.
So great.
But yeah, the Phillies are designed for a best-of-3 series with throwing Wheeler and Nola. I picked the Phillies in 3 games here. It hurts my heart to say that, but that's what I'm expecting. Then again, you can't speak with certainties with any of these series, and I'm really looking forward to watching and laughing it off if the Cardinals don't do well, and having a great time if they if they go far.
Sure.
I've removed all expectations from my mind. We'll see if I still have that mindset when 1 o'clock rolls around tomorrow. But for now,
talk to me after first pitch and tell me exactly how calm and cool you are at that.
Yeah.
So the small sample of a 3-game series, we should just acknowledge anything can happen.
Right.
But a couple of storylines here. The Cardinals were a dominant team at home during the regular season. They were 53-28. That's a 654 winning percentage.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Man.
The Phillies were under 500 on the road. They were 14-17 after the start of September. Not great down the stretch. I don't know. I think you're right. I mean, if they could start out strong here, win this first game, I actually think it would be a pretty attractive bet to bet on the Phillies for this first game, honestly.
Sure.
If you want to do a nice underdog play. And I think in general in this series, the Phillies as the underdogs, plus 115, I think that might be my favorite underdog play, honestly. But I think the Cardinals are just a better all-around team, more fundamentally sound, play better defense. That stuff matters in this kind of atmosphere, and one where the Cardinals have a nice home field advantage. I do worry about the Cardinals pitching. Quintana at the top. I guess Miles Michaelis in game 2.
Dude, Michaelis has been good. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah.
These are not aces.
Yeah. What did they get out of Jack Flaherty too? Is another big question.
He has looked better and better. I did not expect anything from him, but he's gonna. It wouldn't shock me if he starts a potential game 3 or he comes out of the bullpen. If they get into some trouble early on. Wainwright has looked really bad. He's looked bad to the point where I think he might actually go out with Pujols and Yachty.
Yeah.
But Jordan Montgomery against those lefties from the Phillies, like he's been up and down. He was awesome at first, had a few bad blowups, but he's been okay. They have a lot of pitching depth actually, because they're carrying all 5 of those guys, all 5 of those starters.
Yeah.
Like, they can bring them out of the bullpen. And I mean, Ryan, I'll just go ahead and say my pick for this series. So again, I'm taking the Phillies in 3 games, but my pick for the Cardinals is Ryan Helsley, who has been so awesome this year. Like, I don't know, one of our biggest fantasy surprises. DJ and I did that show a couple weeks ago, and he throws 104 miles an hour at times. I think he's an X factor. They can bring him in the 7th inning or like even the 6th inning. They can bring him in whenever they want. Giovanni Gallegos looked terrible in his final start of his final outing of the regular season, but he is an X factor too. They got a pretty good bullpen. I think their pitching depth is underrated. And I know it's not like a ton of swing and miss dudes, but so anyway, Helsley is my pick for our fantasy lineups for the Cardinals. And then I went JT. I think we all went JT Realmuto for our catch.
Yeah,
we did.
Yep, was a clean sweep across the board there.
Yeah.
DJ, why don't you give us your prediction on this one? I don't think you did yet.
So I have Cardinals in 3 in this series, and my picks. Again, Realmuto, that was a clean sweep. But so from the Cardinals, I have Paul Goldschmidt. I was the only one of us to take Paul Goldschmidt. But yeah, basically, MVP, I suppose. Not a bad choice. So
pretty good choice. He picked it up again toward the end of the year too. He fell into a pretty bad slump, but
was kind of due for just some regression after how good he was for most of the season. It's nice to see him pitting well. This is my one. You got to go one series going 2 games. So I like the Phillies in this series. I just think that having 2 top 10 pitchers in this series is going to matter. And I think Bryce Harper, who I was very tempted to take as my outfielder, is going to have a big series as well. This is my one series that I'm not predicting to go 3. Again, we have Realmuto because catchers, stolen bases, so on and so forth. And then for the Cardinals, I have Nolan Arenado, just because if the Cardinals are going to play deep, I think Nolan Arenado and Paul Goldschmidt are going to be very big parts of it. And since I have my sweet Vladdy Jr. playing first base, I will have Arenado on the hot corner.
By the way, Drew, a even money line for both them, -107 for Phillies and Cardinals on points bets for game 1. So not even giving a favorite in that game 1 spot. For me, I have the Phillies in 2 on this one as well. Look, I think the Phillies have a worse bullpen, which has been a thorn in their side for years.
That's not been an issue for the Phillies in the past.
It hasn't been in the past. Yes, it has.
Zach Eflin's their new closer.
Quite a little bit.
Yeah.
I don't know. Can you bring up the ghost of Brad Lidge?
So good.
So the Phillies bullpen has been just an absolute suspect for years. And until they prove it on the biggest stages, that's going to continue to be one that I have question marks around. The Phillies have never been a good defensive team. And we know how, right? Really? You mean Schwarber's not a Gold Glove outfielder out there?
Let's ask Keith Hernandez what he thinks.
Let's ask Keith Hernandez a lot of things. But
obviously that defense means so much more in the postseason. Just every little play gets blown up a little bit more. Speed, they're not a particularly fast team, the Phillies. All that being said, they've got the 2 best pitchers in this series going in games 1 and 2. They have the best player, I think, one of the best players overall in Bryce Harper and a meaty top half of the lineup that I think in a 2-game, 3-game series, I think that's short enough where you can hopefully avoid all of the little things that will eventually get picked apart in a best of 5 and a best of 7 if they were to get to those spots. So while I'm not sure about the Phillies long term, I think in a best of 3-game series, I think the Phillies with Nola and Wheeler as a 1-2 top, I think they can get that done in 2, and this might be the only one. At least I'm with you, Chris. I think this is the only one that I have not going to Sunday on that spot. Players-wise, again, we all went Realmuto, so nothing new to say there. And I went with Arenado as well at third base. Continues to just prove more and more that the Coors Field effect that everyone was worried was going to disappear from his stat line when he left. It didn't. He's still really good.
So the Cardinals gave up so much for him, though. You know,
I think we are paying more for Nolan Arenado than the St. Louis Cardinals are, to be completely honest.
That might be correct. Let's flip over to the other series now, and probably the tastiest one of all of them, or at least from my opinion here, as the Padres head to the Big Apple to take on the Mets. Padres end the regular season with an 89-73 record, whereas the Mets win 101 games and will be representing the wild card. Projected matchups: Scherzer versus Darvish in game 1, which is just excellent. Game 2, tentatively right now, is Bassett versus Musgrove, with game 3 being DeGrom versus Snell.
That actually got flipped.
Is that officially flipped? Because
Snell will start game 2.
Snell's going to start game 2. Okay, yes. I was thinking the other part was going to get flipped.
The other thing is
Buck Showalter still getting a little cute.
I don't think it's worth talking about. Like it's
let's do it.
It's silly. It's silly.
Yeah, we're gonna circle back on that because we
know what's going to happen if things happen. Yeah.
I mean, this is, I understand trying to be cute, but this is the one time a year where I don't know if being cute is the right move here. It's worked out for Buck Showalter once, and it's really blown up in his face the other time. We'll see how that goes. Despite winning 101 games, though, the Mets obviously and are not the NL East champs, had a 10.5 game lead on June 1st, but were unable to hold on to the division and a first round bye. DJ, I'll kick it to you for this one, at least off the front here as our resident Met fan. How do Mets fans feel about this? Obviously, if you had said at the beginning of the year, the Mets win 101 games, you take that 7 days of the week and twice on Sunday. So I don't care about any of that. But because of the new format, because of the fact that there is a first round bye that they are now not going to get, the fact that they are going to have to burn some of their pitchers in this best of 3 series, and on top of that, they are now in the Dodgers half of the bracket, whereas before they could have at least avoided them till a best of 7. How are you as a Met fan kind of feeling about how the season ended up?
I think maybe I'm a little bit more rational than a lot of Mets Twitter. So
I would agree with that wholeheartedly, just in general. Yeah.
But yeah, it's fine to be disappointed and like be upset about it. And especially if you win 101 games, like,
yeah,
you know, it's deflating. It's when you hold on to first place for over 150 days or whatever it was. And then you don't win it in the end. Yes, it's disappointing, but everything starts anew on Friday. You know what I mean? You got to put that in the rear view mirror. I think the players are just focused on winning baseball games at this point. And the Mets have, regardless of recent results, you know, DeGrom's 6 ERA over his last 4 starts. Scherzer kind of came up small in that Braves series. They're still Jacob freaking DeGrom and Max freaking Scherzer.
Yes.
I don't think there's anybody you would take over them right now. Maybe Verlander. I don't know, but it's a very small group if you were going to. I think the Mets should feel extremely confident about having those two leading the way. I think the Mets offense, while flawed in some ways, is deeper than the Padres lineup.
Oh yeah.
They know how to work pitchers. I think they have Edwin Diaz, who's been at lights out of his mind all season long. I still think they're in a very good position in this series. Like we were saying, the way they're going to potentially split up the rotation does add an interesting storyline to this series. But I do not think that facing the Dodgers in a 5-game series is a bad thing. I think facing them in a 7-game series is a bad thing because the cream will rise to the top.
Right.
It's a lot more likely that they could grind you down over 7 games. So maybe getting them in 5 games is not such a bad thing. But of course, the Mets have to get through this series first. But I don't think getting on this side of the bracket is maybe the end of the world as much as Mets fans would have you believe.
I agree. I know Mets Twitter is nuts, and that's awesome. They're very passionate. But man, and I the Padres could have been like a fun dark horse team. They've got some interesting names, and Manny Machado is an MVP candidate, and some very good pitching. Darvish and Snell was awesome in the second half. Like,
oh yeah.
And Joe Musgrove just super steady. I think they won that trade. But but you run into DeGrom and Scherzer in Queens. It's going to be wild. They get the primetime slot on Friday. What are they playing on Saturday? Is it also primetime?
I think it's 7:30 on Saturday.
Yeah. So I think it's going to be a party out there, and you've got the two best, maybe the 1 and 2 best pitchers on the planet, or like right up there, and I like DJ said, a very good deep lineup that is kind of dynamic. It gets on base. There's pop. You can steal bases. There's extra base hits. Like I think the Mets are almost underrated right now, just because they didn't even really blow the NL East. The Braves just took it from them.
Right.
And I think the Mets can turn it around. Like it's not even going to be a turnaround. Just like turn it on all of a sudden, and they're a very dangerous postseason team. And I think I'd pick them over the Dodgers. I made out one of those brackets on MLB.com today, and I did pick them over the Dodgers.
One thing I'll say is that the Padres rotation is scary. I mean, Darvish, Snell, Musgrove, that's really good.
Yep.
I'm more worried about Snell than Darvish or Musgrove, because the Mets have not been very good against left-handed pitching.
That's what I was going to say.
One big player they're missing is Starling Marte with that fractured finger. He's been someone who can really help against left-handed pitching. It seems like he's still testing out the finger to see if he'll be ready to go during the series, but I find it very, very unlikely that he'll, even if he's on the roster, will be a significant contributor. I don't expect him to be on the roster. Yeah. I think that is a big loss for the Mets.
Yeah, I think that the thing here is like, I probably would have picked the Padres to beat the majority of the National League in a 3-game series because of that starting rotation that you were mentioning.
Yeah.
But they're going up against Max Scherzer and Jacob deGrom. And the problem is, it's not that those guys can't match them. It's that who the hell is going to hit for the San Diego Padres? Because after Juan Soto and after Manny Machado, is there anybody in that lineup that even like remotely scares you?
I feel like they have a greater reputation offensively than what is going on there.
No, I totally agree. Like, and guys like Jake Cronenworth has picked it up a little bit lately. But I'm just pitching around those guys and making the other dudes in that lineup beat me. And I just don't think that they can. It's going to be a scary series. It's one I have going 3 because I think one of you, Darvish and Blake Snell, will be able to get a W in the series, even going up against as good of legitimate Hall of Fame pitchers going against those guys. But I just can't see them scoring enough runs to actually win a series against this team.
So I have it Mets 2-0.
Go ahead.
I was just you go ahead, Dave. No, you go.
I was just going to say, let's discuss this kind of rotation juggle thing that might go into that. Yeah. So basically, what Buck Showalter is hinting at is that if the Mets take Game 1 behind Max Scherzer, they will have Chris Bassett start Game 2, so they could potentially save Jacob deGrom for Game 1 of the series against the Dodgers.
Right.
So the question is that a smart move, or do you just go for the gusto and say, we're throwing our best 2 and we want to get out of here and get this series done?
I would start my best 2 guys. Yeah. I think saving for a situation like that is a pretty significant mistake. I mean, trust Chris Bassett. Chris Bassett's been a solid option for well over the majority of the year. A ton of great starts. I think he can absolutely win that baseball game. And if he's your Game 1 starter against the Dodgers, still giving you a great chance to win. I think that's just too cute by half. It doesn't make sense to me to not go for, this is the reason why you are paying those guys an awful lot of money. Go do it. It's like similar to Russell Wilson. You paid him $245 million and you're kicking a 64-yard field goal. You might as well start Max Scherzer and Jacob deGrom to go take you to that big series against the Dodgers.
You brought up the NFL. Like, have you guys ever played like a survivor pool?
Yeah.
Yes.
Trying to get cute in week 1 or week 2, you're going to be gone.
I'm out.
Oh yeah.
I've learned that lesson. Just pick the favorite, pick Scherzer, pick deGrom, get it done with, figure out the rest later.
Yeah.
Now, I will say it might make sense if you get like a big lead on Saturday.
Yeah,
you know
pull
what I'm
them early.
saying?
Okay,
pull them early.
Like
that makes sense.
Yeah.
But you will kick yourself. And I do believe it's not apples and oranges, but I do believe Buck Showalter has kicked himself, even if he thinks it's the right decision one time for getting too cute with something. Just pitch your best guys, man.
Yeah, I think this is I think the definition of like trying to overthink it a little bit too much. Like, hey, you've got two of the top 5 starting pitchers in baseball.
And it could be gamesmanship too.
In a best of 3 series when you need to win 2 games, and the margins of error are so thin in a best of 3 series that you can't afford to lose even 1 game. So I wouldn't risk that in the spot. Nothing against Chris Bassett, but look, Max Scherzer did not look particularly strong in his last, like you said, kind of just like stumbled a little bit down the stretch. He's kind of he's not at full strength, or at least that we know from Max Scherzer. We expect him to live up to Max Scherzer levels, but still, Jacob deGrom, like you said, an ERA over 6 in his last 4 starts. Bassett kind of walked into the postseason just a little bit shakier than he had been for 3/4 of the season. So there's a little bit of question marks surrounding all of them. And DJ, not to be rude, but this is also the Mets. Like, this is not a team that has a ton of this kind of experience in this spot that they can kind of feel kind of confident and walk into the series like they already are looking at the next opponent.
I don't know. If you have Max Scherzer on the mound, I mean, I think it all changes the minute Max Scherzer goes on the mound. I mean, that dude has so much experience, so much presence. I think that will kind of carry the day. And I think we'll allay a lot of the fears of Mets fans to have that experience.
Sure.
If there's any question, if game 1 doesn't go to the Mets, if the Padres win game 1, again, they've said that obviously if they win game 1, then Bassett goes game 2. I know that that's the optimistic play here. If they lose game 1 here, is deGrom 100% getting the ball in game 2? I would have to assume, right? We're not getting too cute for anything out here, right?
No.
Mets fans would revolt if he did.
I was going to say.
But I also think there's
going to play a war march at the end of that.
There's something to be said for, like, how does a pitcher feel not knowing when they're going to pitch? I think you got to tell. These guys got to know. Like, and especially with deGrom,
they're pitching deGrom in game 2. Come on.
Yeah, for all the physical issues that he's had, just tell him when he's starting.
100%. You have to be ready for that stuff. Yeah,
they have told him he's starting game 2.
I sure hope so, man.
I really do too.
So.
I think it's all just gamesmanship, the type of thing where, and maybe you did see Buck Showalter's all of God's children when asked about everybody making the playoff roster as well. I love this guy so much.
He's funny.
Yeah. But real quick, I'll say I'm picking the Mets in 3. If the San Diego Padres got to wear their City Connect uniforms, I would change my pick in a heartbeat. For the Padres, I'm going with Yu Darvish. I'm scared that he's only going to get 1 start, but I think he's going to pitch really well. Yu Darvish was really, really good this year and not talked about enough, in my personal opinion, for how good he's going. And I'm going to go with the guy who's pitching against him as my Mets pick as well, Max Scherzer. I will never pick against Max Scherzer in the postseason because he legitimately scares the crap out of me.
I'm going Mets in 2, same picks as Chris, Scherzer, and Darvish. I think it's going to be a really good matchup in game 1, and then deGrom is going to pitch game 2, and the Mets are going to win in 2.
You think deGrom's going to pitch game 2, Drew?
I think I've said that over and over. I don't know why we spent 10 minutes on it.
Because you've got nowhere to do. You have nothing to do. Like, I can't even imagine how little you have to do. Like,
you're not tired. You're feeling great.
Yeah, he just had 3 shots of espresso before the show. It's got to be at this point. It's kicked in by now.
It's like wearing off to where I'm overtired now.
So I'm going Mets in 2. I think they get this over quickly. God, I hope so. And I'm taking Max Scherzer from the Mets. I think we all maybe took Max Scherzer.
I think so.
From the Padres, I kind of mix it up here. I made Machado as my third baseman. We'll see how that goes. Obviously, he's between him and Soto, that's those are the bats on that team.
Mm-hmm. Right.
We'll see what happens. He's capable of great things. So
I was tempted to say Padres in 3 just to see if there was that version of this because I think one of the favorites of these wild cards is going to go down. I think one of the top 4 or 5 teams in baseball, and I put the Astros, Yankees, Dodgers, Mets, and Braves in that top 5. I think there's a really good shot we see 2 of them go down before the AL and NLCS just because of the weirdness of baseball. And I was tempted to do it. Yeah. Padres plus 152 is not even that bad of a payout for a short series where they're going to go Darvish, Musgrove, Snell, or Darvish, Snell, Musgrove. Right. And honestly, from a betting standpoint, I might throw a couple bucks on Padres plus 150, but I'm still picking overall Mets in 3. I think 3 games at Citi Field. That stadium is going to be electric. Again, Darvish and DeGrom and Scherzer is just real tough to get through, even if it is games 1 and 3. And my players, we all had Max Scherzer, so Max Scherzer across the board, and you Darvish for me as well. Like you said, Chris, before, just had a great under the radar season. Kind of didn't start out particularly strong, but really finished well over the last 60% of the year. I really like him moving forward. So give me Darvish on that spot. Now, obviously, we said the Padres and Mets winner, if that will go on to play the Dodgers. Phillies Cards winner, if that will go on to face the Braves. Why don't we give our players for the Braves and Dodgers as well? Chris, start us off.
Sure. I've got shortstop Dansby Swanson. Fantastic year, and I think he's going to have. It just seems to be like a guy who is kind of built for postseason success to me, and I think he's going to get a chance to drive in a bunch of runs in that lineup. And then Mookie Betts, because Mookie Betts is one of the best players in baseball, and I think he's going to get a chance to score a lot of runs, even if they're playing against the Mets.
So I have Julio Urias, game 1 starter for the Dodgers. I would assume at this point.
Yeah.
I think he could win a lot of games and throw a lot of innings in this postseason.
It's been great.
So, and I'm Max Fried as my pick from the Braves. They're de facto ace at this point. He's been great down the stretch. And again, with that, I love the Braves lineup. I could see them running the table. They're that good. I think they might be better than they were last year.
Agreed.
They
have Acuna.
They don't have Ozzy Albies, but I mean, I don't even know if it matters. Like, they're that good.
Yeah.
They are a scary team. So I'm taking Fried.
I have Fried as well. And for the Dodgers, I have Freddie Freeman, led the major leagues in hits, and contact, can do a lot of funny things in the postseason.
Sure can.
I think this Dodgers team is beatable, though. I mean, they're scary because they ran the table this year and set records for run differential, and the amount of wins by multiple runs that they stacked up was so impressive. They did that a lot against non-contenders. They dominated the Padres, but out of the other teams in the playoff field, they went 15-16 combined against the Braves, Mets, Phillies, Cardinals, and Guardians. So I don't know, not having Walker Buehler.
Back end of the bullpen is not trustworthy.
To have an unsettled, like 8th and 9th inning situation. I think if you have eyes on winning a World Series, you want them in a 5-game series. You want them in the NLDS, and I think that's the path.
You guys go ahead and bet against the Dodgers all you
I
want.
know. I think I'm just I'm playing some kind of emotional.
Maybe I'm just look, it backfired on me last year. They ended up losing the NLCS, and I thought they would just dominate into the postseason.
Yeah, you scoffed us even when we considered somebody else other than the Dodgers.
You know what?
Year.
It's the second
full
time I've
nose
been wrong
up
in my
That's
entire life. But I actually, I'm going to pick the Braves to win the World Series. So it's funny that I'm talking out of both sides of it, but I think that's going to be one of the most fascinating. Like, there are 3 teams in the National League that are deserving to me of
it's loaded.
It's so loaded, especially all due respect to the American League, who, the Yankees had a very strong regular season, even with some scuffles down the stretch. Houston looks great. The wild card teams did what they did. Toronto, I think, would do better in a lot of other divisions, but that National League, I'm really looking forward to whatever version of the NLCS is, and it will be very funny if it ends up being like San Diego against Philadelphia.
hey, after the Juan Soto trade, everyone was ready to put the Padres potentially in that NLCS.
Yeah, that's true.
I have Fried and Freeman on my end as well for my 2 picks. I'm tantalized at the idea of a Freddie Freeman versus Atlanta NLCS at some point, because that, especially after earlier this year when there was the basically who you playing for right now, Freddie, when he was getting emotional when the Braves were in town.
So dumb.
So that was I think that's just a fascinating kind of theme that might play there, and I would love to see him in Atlanta for a potentially game winner there. But yeah, no, those 2 are for me here. Max Fried was just phenomenal this entire year for someone who I think we we don't talk about it enough because he doesn't post like gaudy strikeout numbers. And
100%.
He's just a really, really good pitcher. And this is the type of time of the year where players like Max Fried really start to shine. So yeah, give me him as well. Okay. So with that, I think that's just going to end our show for today. If you enjoyed the show, then make sure you're subscribed wherever you listen to your podcast so you don't miss an episode in the future. And if you listen on Apple Podcasts, please be sure to rate and review us. DJ loves those 5 stars, so give them to him. And whether you are deep in your fantasy football seasons or prepping for those basketball fantasy leagues, be sure to check out all of our coverage right here on NBCSportsEdge.com. Tons of great articles, podcasts, videos, and more to help you get that edge over the rest of your league. You can follow me on Twitter at ColDon'tLie, and you can follow Chris at Crawford_MILB, Drew at Drew Silva, and DJ at DJ Short. We'll be back next Wednesday night with another postseason episode, so make sure you don't miss it. Until then, enjoy Wildcard Weekend, stay safe out there, and as always, thanks for listening.
Dom Smith, Wildcard MVP.